Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. This is the fourth of our four-part series on freedom, and that's the key, is if we can take our eyes off of the problem and go to the solution, which is God. If we can, as that old saying says, instead of talking to God about your big problem, tell your problem about your big God. That is the way we are to move through anything that would bind us, that would seek to limit us, is to remember that there is a spiritual truth that is greater. Greater is he that is within me than he that is within the world, is the way the scriptures remark this to us. That we are here to overcome the condition, to reveal the truth of who we are. So today we are talking about financial freedom, and I think that the universe always has such a funny sense of humor. We received some of the worst financial statistics this week that we have experienced in decades. And it's just such an opportunity. It's an invitation for us to say, where is my faith? Is my faith based upon the GDP and the Dow Jones, or is my faith based upon the truth of the indwelling presence, the indwelling power, the indwelling possibility, the creative energy of life itself? The same creative impulse that said, let there be light, and there was light, is in you and is in me. We are here to remember this truth, and that is the key to our freedom. So this week, we are talking about financial freedom. And to begin, I wanted to actually go to my absolute rubber meets road, rock bottom resource for practical spirituality, which is the 12 steps. This is where I first really learned how to live my spirituality into existence. There is a passage in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says this: the spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. And as many of you know, if you've experienced addiction and recovery, or if you have family or friends who have, that it's a systematic series of steps to be taken to freedom from addiction. And it says this: if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. That passage, it's called the promises of the 12 steps. And whether or not you have experienced addiction, we have all experienced bondage to self. We have all experienced a place where we forget the truth of God's presence and power, and we get into a hole one way or another. And what this is seeking to remind us of is that if we will return our attention to God, that we will be shown the way to recover, and that all of these good things will happen to us. And as we're speaking about financial freedom, I want to begin with this idea. It's the fear of financial insecurity will leave us. And what that begins to show us is that it's not about the number in your bank account. It's not about the GDP. It's about an inner awareness of God's presence. It's about faith. Jesus spoke of this so beautifully. I don't know if you know this, but fear of financial insecurity is not a phenomenon only in our generation. This is something that has been going on as long as people learn to I don't know what's the word, to monetize energy, to put energy into transportable form called money, where instead of having to bring a sheep to buy a loaf of bread, you can just have a little thing here, whether it be a chip in your credit card or your phone or cash. But this idea that we will not have enough, the fear that I'm not going to be okay, is as ancient as humanity. And Jesus spoke to it so beautifully in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. Therefore, I tell you, don't worry about your life, about what you'll eat or drink, or your body, or what you'll wear. Isn't life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And he goes on to speak about, in the King James it says, consider the lilies of the field. I love that phrase. It's so poetic. Consider the lilies of the field. They neither weave nor toil. I can't remember. I could have read it right here, but it was the King James that I wanted. But Solomon in all his glory was not attired as so beautifully as these. And then at the end of the passage, Jesus says this, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you as well. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And what Jesus, the master teacher, is seeking to show us is that it is the financial insecurity, it is the fear of financial insecurity that causes us to turn inward and causes us to become selfish, that causes us to forget that we are a part of a generous system of circulation of divine energy. That's the truth of reality. In the meditation this morning, I was inspired to bring to mind that image of the tree that simply moves through the seasons, knowing and each year gaining strength and growing. That's a beautiful metaphor for the way that we can navigate the changes in our lives. That we can trust that there is a deeper power, a deeper resource within us, ceaseless, divine, creative energy. And when we remember that and place our attention there instead on the falling Dow Jones stock market, then we can begin to know that we are greater than the numbers, greater than the condition. So the first step in financial freedom is faith, is releasing the fear, is remembering that we don't have to have all the answers for tomorrow. Emmett Fox, who is one of the great teachers in our movement, in the New Thought movement, he said it this way in his book on the Sermon on the Mount. Of course, Jesus did not mean that you as a human being are to copy the lives or the methods of the birds and the flowers, literally. For you are infinitely higher in the scale of creation than they. The lesson is that you are adapt yourself as completely to your element as they do to theirs. And your true element is the presence of God. Righteousness, to seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Now, if you grew up in a sin and damnation tradition, that word righteousness may have some baggage for you. I'm here to release your baggage. What righteousness means is right relationship. To be in right relationship with reality. And to be, and think about that tree that you saw in the meditation. Does it worry that it's not being a tree enough? It just is. And the tree doesn't lean forward or lean back. It grows straight from the ground to the heavens, and it just is. That is right relationship to reality. That mental image for us too, that our roots are grounded deep in God, and that we are empowered and nurtured to live big into life. That's what it's about. The second point I'd like to make today is that you are free to create the life of your desire. Really, this is our bread and butter at Unity. Prosperity teaching, abundance teaching, we have been about this for over a century. because we understand there's only one life, one presence, one power, and we are expressions of it. And that our thoughts are creative, and when we align our thought with the vibration of who we truly are, of right thinking, not the self-critical, judgmental, small thinking, but the big thinking of who we are, when we keep our thoughts there, then we co-create with the divine. We tap into that flow of energy, and we find ourselves in the place of abundance, giving and receiving. Now, sometimes there's a misunderstanding about this teaching, like I'm going to say an affirmation and then bags of money are just going to show up at my door. And if that is your experience, that you need to be up here teaching this sermon today, because that's actually not the way it has worked for me. The way these teachings have worked in my life is that as I have changed my thinking, I have changed. In the book of Proverbs, attributed to King Solomon, it says, "As a man thinketh, so he is." And I'm going to add a little bit of the proverb of Michael Gott on top of that. And as a person is, so they do. That if you are a person of prosperity and abundance and generosity, how are you going to act? Prosperously, abundantly, generously. To be a generous receiver and a generous giver. I ask you this question: how do you receive compliments? I'm not going to say, but I just saw one of the singers just go. Do you cringe a little bit when somebody tells you you look good? Or do you go, thank you? That might be a clue for how you are as a generous receiver. And if we are to do as we are, then we will be in that space of not being too worried about the changes in the conditions, because those numbers go up and down all the time. John told me a little story about, I think it's a joke, but that a man was going into a department store and the salesperson said, "Well, can I help find your size?" He said, "Well, I'm a medium, but an extra large fits a lot better." That's consciousness. And I want to say, too, that it's all right to be where you are. That this journey of financial freedom, it never ends. And we all go through twists and turns, and we go through seasons where it just rocks along and it's easy. And then we go through times where we really have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to put our money where our faith is, would be the better way to say it. And we know that we're going to be fine, and that we will. We will rise, and we will see a new season of generosity again. There's the fabulous story. Oh, I want to remind you, too, that next week, in case you missed the announcement, I am teaching Prosperity Plus 3, a wonderful curriculum created by Mary Morrissey. Many people in our community have worked with these materials, but it does take practice. That as a person is, so they do, and to learn how to do the doing better, you might need some help. You might need some training. You might need some accountability. So I invite you to join me in that class. It's going to be on Zoom at 1:30 for 7 weeks on Sundays. And it's a chance for you to deepen in the practice of who you are as a spiritual child of God. There's the story of Elisha and the widow, which I don't want to tell the whole story, but she was poor, had nothing, she said. "I only have a small jar of oil," and her children are being sold into slavery. And so what does the prophet tell her to do? Go ask for all the jars you can borrow from your neighbors and pour from the small jar into the larger jars. And the miracle was that all the jars she had were filled. The metaphysical interpretation of this is that God is forever pouring forth abundantly. But we can only hold that for which we have a container to receive. And what is the container? Metaphysically, it's our consciousness. If you know, you are. And that's what these classes, that's what these Sunday messages, that's what all of this is designed to grow our consciousness of the goodness of life. How often do we say, God is good all the time? And I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it's good. I had a dear friend of mine in this community who had a tragic loss in her family. And for a while, she couldn't even be in the room when that affirmation was said because it felt so in opposition and disrespectful of her experience. And I don't make that wrong, and that may be true for you if you're going through a deep period of grief. But what I invite you to do is to remember that the goodness of God is big enough and deep enough to hold all the human condition, can hold all your fear, all your pain, all your sorrow can be held in God's goodness. And it's okay to hurt. It's one of the things I've said many, many times, that we are such a positive and practical spiritual tradition that we really do focus on seeing the best. That's our gig. That's what we do. And so when people are in deep pain, they don't feel like they can come to church. They don't feel like they can connect to community because they carry a shame around their pain. There is no need for your shame here. That we all are in this together, seeking to grow and to heal. So let us hold the truth of God's goodness for you when you're hurting if you can't hold it for yourself in that moment. That's what community is for. I have a caution around working with this law of attraction and manifestation technology. As we said, the Proverbs tell us, as a man thinketh, so he is, and as Michael says, as a man is, so he does. Well, if you focus on the getting, on the more, see what the law does is it will reflect back to you perfectly your consciousness. So if you're thinking, I need more, then what you're going to be receiving is a greater expansion of your consciousness of I need more. I saw this. A friend of mine was dating, well, I don't know how to say this politely, was being pursued by a married man. I'll just say it like that, okay? And this man was incredibly successful and wealthy. We're talking private plane kind of wealthy. And who had a gorgeous spouse already, but was pursuing more. And as my friend was talking about the experience of this person, and I don't know him, so he just becomes a sermon illustration for me, so I bless him on his journey. But it became, that's the danger of having an acquisitive consciousness. Like if I keep acquiring, that there's never enough. And you can use spiritual principles to gain incredible amounts of earthly goods, but if you don't have as Karen Russo says, the divine feminine consciousness of satisfaction and gratitude, then it will not be enough. And so the last point I want to share with us today is that you are free to give your gift. We have to bring a little bit of an adjustment into our prosperity teaching because I think that if we're not careful, it can just launch right into consumerism. That if I just get enough stuff, that hole in my soul will finally be satisfied. It will never be enough stuff. There ain't enough stuff in the world to experience the abundance of God. The abundance of God comes in your right connection with infinite flow, and there is a giving that is not required. It's not like a thing you got to do. It's just the thing that naturally happens. Going back to the idea of the tree, just naturally gives as of its essence. It just is giving shade, giving fruit, some trees, but all the plant life on our planet gives the oxygen which we need to breathe. There is a natural giving and receiving in life. And I struggled with this idea. Well, I have a point here I want to make real quick. Yeah, so the thing that we need to be careful about our prosperity is that it's not consumerism, it's not greed, it's not a ceaseless hunger to acquire or to get more. So many people have these miracle manifestations of money, which is great, but what if we had such consciousness that we didn't need to manifest a huge sum of money? What if we just lived in enough all the time? That's the consciousness that I'm seeking to rise to. And I want to talk about the word enough. How many of you, when you hear the word enough, you hear the word barely in front of it? Barely enough. And what if we instead had the word fully? Fully enough for all my needs. Because the fear of financial insecurity, there ain't enough. But the faith of financial truth, of spiritual abundance, is that there is always enough. God is sufficient to my needs. And so we want to live in the sense of enoughness. Myrtle Fillmore said it this way: true prosperity is not making money or putting out good or developing property. It's determining what our individual soul requires in order to cause it to unfold more and more of God. Did you get that? It's what we need so that we can unfold more of God. And then how to harmonize God's expression with the needs of our fellow man so that all are really benefited and inspired to unfold and express more of their spiritual resources. She had such a beautiful consciousness in so many ways. And as I mentioned, this prosperity teaching really started in Unity and the other New Thought movements in the late 1800s. And right at the beginning, she said, it's not about making money. It's about tapping into the goodness of God, that you have all your needs met so you can give all that you are. And so that's what we're about today. Some of us may be headed into a time of uncertainty if our job changes. Some of us may be headed into a time where we may see that our retirement accounts may shift a little bit. And what I want to remind us today is that it's never about those numbers. If we can trust the enoughness of God, that we will be given all that we need so that we may give that which is ours to give. I really struggled with, I grew up in the Pentecostal kind of evangelical movement. I actually went to Oral Roberts University, and he had this whole teaching on seed faith. You may remember that, and which he got from Unity, evidently. But there was an idea that if you gave to his ministry, then God would bless you. And I don't discount the principle and the energetic. It definitely works. There was a joke. He had this giant bronze sculpture of praying hands at the entrance of the campus. And somebody said, well, there used to be hands open to heaven, but somebody threw a $10 bill up there. I don't know if that's true or not. But what I know is that I saw some of the excesses and some of the dark side of prosperity teaching. So when I came to New Thought as a young adult, I was a little skeptical. And I didn't quite know how to handle it, because I've heard teachers in our movement who it feels a little bit of like that acquiring hungry energy. I didn't like it. And then one day I heard Mary Morrissey speak. It was that we were doing a retreat together in Montana. And she said it just sort of as an offhand thing. And she said, well, truly, everybody needs enough money so that they can give their gift without having to worry about it. And I said, that's it. That's the key of prosperity teaching. And Myrtle said it 100 years earlier, that if we tap into who we are in God, then God will supply all of our needs so that we can be part of this beautiful blossoming of healing in humanity. Because I'm telling you, we're heading into a time where we're going to need each other like never before. And we're going to need each other to encourage. We're going to need each other to lift us up in prayer. And we're going to need each other to remind us who we are, because we forget. So right now, if you've forgotten, if you are lost in the pit of your own worry and fear, I'm telling you, you are enough. You are the light of God. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.